Okay, this is not an official episode. This is a standalone thing. It's not a reaction video for me, but it should be for Heath. Uh, and I made it a separate video because the copyright issues are very hard to understand. And you see
Hmm.
reaction videos all the time, and I wonder how they get away with it, but we don't. So we're going to try the whole pause here and there kind of thing. Uh, and even if it comes out later, it's still because I have to do all because I was watching videos on doing reaction videos, and a lot of times, even though they do those kind of things, they still have to challenge it or get permission from the owner of the music, who a lot of times will just say, yeah, it's just a reaction video, so you can keep it going, but you have to go through that whole process. Now, luckily, this isn't something that gives you a strike. It just takes the video down until you address the situation. So we'll do that. Hopefully, if you're seeing this, then we did it right.
Yay.
But this is a video. We talk a lot on here about dating crisis, marriage crisis. We have sexy time with Sam, and we go through. But an artist out there that's if you haven't heard of him, look him up. He's got a lot of good substantive music, which actually the lyrics
Oh, I
matter.
remember. Yeah, I remember what you're talking about now.
Yeah,
I remember you sending this to me.
the lyrics matter. It's not just the beat. So we're gonna go through one. It's Dax with Darius Rucker, "To Be a Man." So
Yeah, I remember this now. I never got around to it because when you said that the lyrics were important, I didn't have time to sit and pay attention to it. And
mhm.
then I completely forgot about it because I'm old and forgetful.
Yeah, and it's not like Dax does a lot of rap stuff, but this is I think it's actually on the country top
Hmm.
top 10. So it's a little bit less. You should be able to understand the lyrics a little bit. He's not, but the you see right here, there's one where a bunch of people, what he did on Twitter, or not Twitter, uh, the one that the Chinese own, TikTok.
Hmm.
He put a thing out which is like, put your own lyrics in here in a duet, and all of these other artists put their own lyrics in there, and it's really good. But this is the shorter one. This is the remix with Darius Rucker. Just tell me when you're ready.
Go ahead.
All right. And I'll try to pause it frequently so we don't get hit.
I can't hide myself. I don't expect you to understand. I just hope I can explain what it's like to be a man.
So that's the standard chorus. We're about to go into Rutger. Again, I'm pausing just so we don't break the copyright rules.
It's
I
a
mean,
lonely road, and they don't care about what you know. It's not about how you feel, but what you provide inside that home.
pause it right there. I mean, that's already profound because um, so much, or I think it really got going in the 80s, but then also the 90s is where it really took off. The idea that men need to get in touch with their feelings. Yeah, no, they don't. That's
No,
not.
I
I
made the
mean,
comment. We'll maybe expand it. Maybe it's the next topic, since we'll be piggybacking off of this for the
mhm,
next one. Is I made the statement that women need to talk about their feelings, men need to feel.
mm, mhm, mhm.
And I think that's the undertone there. Is it's not about
Yes.
talking about your feelings. We need to actually feel things.
The idea, the problem with what was pushed in the 80s and 90s is it because it wasn't that. It wasn't dealing with with emotions as a man. It was about feminizing men. That's different. That doesn't work. In fact, that's problematic because it runs contrary to our nature.
Being a man is what you make it. You can't always live up to expectations. You try to please everybody while you struggle, so you fake it and end up out of balance, compromising situations. As a good man, do what he should, man. Give everything he has and do everything he could, man.
There's both the chorus and then this verse as well. There's something inherent there that I really like and think is important, which is, I don't remember how I got on this train of thought when I was on my walk last night, and I still can't remember exactly where I heard this. I think it was on Crowder's show, and I think it was his dad who said this. That is profound but so simple it makes you feel stupid, that you didn't think of it, which was children don't learn by osmosis. And that is something that I was certainly guilty of, but I think a lot of people are. On the other hand, part of that is because as a man, you don't necessarily vocalize or emote. And you're not necessarily even looking for that as a boy. You know, when you think about the heroes of children and why they are their heroes. So yes, it is true that children don't learn by osmosis, and that is something that parents need to keep in mind. But that's also why the masculine feminine dynamic works and has worked for millennia, because you need both of those, and it's a lot easier for women to be the explainer. Is that making sense? That we impart, men tend to impart facts. We, you know, that's our way of explaining. When it comes to explaining life, that's a little more difficult. And that's where that I think that's what they're talking about. That is that struggle between being an example and spending time doing what you're supposed to be doing as a man, especially as a father and a husband, but then also needing to explain it.
Well, and I think part of it is there's the burden of the thing you're protecting from, which is the elements. It's providing food with starvation. You're protecting from starvation. You provide a home. You're protecting from the elements. You're protecting in these ways that even the knowledge that you're going through this sacrifice would cause stress to them, so you keep it back. You're doing everything you can to reduce the stress of the people that you love, in your spouse, your kids, everybody involved.
That's a much better way of putting it. And as a personal example, and I talked to you about this at the time, that when we had to put our family dog down that we'd had since we were in college, since the kids were itty bitty kids. I mean, we got him around the same time our daughter was born. So we'd had her for a long time. And we had to put her down. And the hardest part was because they wanted to be there when it happened. So the hardest part was being in the room with my wife and son and not being able to do anything. There's just that the helplessness of the hurt, not for you, not
but the fact that the people you love were hurting
and not being able to do anything about it. Yeah.
You might find yourself feeling all alone inside a house you built that you don't recognize as home. And that's what my daddy told me, and I'll tell my son the same. Now that I'm older, I relate and I actually feel his pain.
You had a better father figure than me. What do you think about those last verses?
That's absolutely true. And I mean, the first time I felt it, well, here we are getting canceled now. I assume I'll get a knock on my door from the police. The first time I had to spank my son, because we've talked about this, about the difference between the father figure you grew up with, who was physical out of anger and insecurity. I never got a spanking where I didn't get a lecture first, because
it's a funny story, because there was one time I completely, absolutely deserved it. And I got it. And I actually came out of it feeling better for it. And it was like, that was the only dad moment that man had. And it was actually punishing me. That was the best dad moment that horrible person had.
But I would imagine you didn't understand it you didn't fully internalize it until the position was flipped, and now you were the dad. And I,
I actually understood that one earlier.
Okay. I
because
couldn't
it
help
felt
but
different.
think
It just
back.
felt different
Yeah.
coming out of that situation where it was,
Mm.
there was still physical pain, but it wasn't a survival situation. It was, you were kind of stupid there. And there was already that self-reflection right away.
I couldn't help but think back to all the times I was told this is going to hurt you more than me. And as a child of rolling my eyes, yeah, right, that's stupid. I'm the one that's getting his butt paddled here. And then you get it and it's, oh man, I feel like an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
He never cried, he might have lied, but he did not complain. And he said, son, one day you'll have to do the same. I get emotional when I stop and think and I look around beyond the county lines of my small town. I think about all the men out there who feel like I do now, who are screaming on the inside but won't ever make a sound.
Before we go into the chorus again. That's why we're here. That's why we're making this reaction video, because we felt this pain. I understand it from an educated level.
Mm-hmm.
You had a better upbringing, so we have two different perspectives on this. But yeah, you're not alone, man.
Well, yeah, and it adds to it that I'm a big Darius Rucker fan, in part because he sings with such emotion, and so, I mean, he's really letting it all hang out there, and you feel that that is truth, that this isn't just him as an artist, but this is him as a father, and as kind of he says in those lyrics, once a son, and oh well, now he gets it, that you and for me, I thought it odd when I was told this as a kid about the struggles my parents had, and kind of overhearing sometimes and not really getting it, because for me, growing up as an Army brat was awesome, because we got to live in some really cool places and go to some really cool places, but it was a lot of stress for my dad. And so every time it came to re-up or get out, it was a difficult decision. But ultimately, he ended up staying for 23 years because it was the best thing for his family, even though for him, it was a lot of stress and a lot of difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
And for my mom too. She had to put up with, weeks at home alone with 4 freaking kids. And so she didn't like it. She liked it even less than he did. But the more that every time they sat down to talk about it and weigh the pros and cons, it was the best option for the kids. And so dad dealt with it.
Well, yeah, we had this in our family when I graduated and I was doing research and in that life, and also working the sports performance company. Nicole got into the residency here in Houston, and NASA cut their funding. So my job that I was supposed to have went away, but there were jobs in Arizona, there were jobs, Atlanta and but I would have had to leave. She couldn't leave. She already anybody who's been through that whole process knows once you're in the residency, you're there. You don't just transfer. And so it was, okay, well, what do I do? And that's when we opened the business. That's when we opened the gym, because it was the best. It was the least worst option, right? There was no good option. It was go through the growing pains of working 16 hours a day. But hey, I own my own place, so my son can be there. I've got pictures of him sleeping in the rack we had the physio balls and mats in. It's and those were decisions you made then. And yeah, you can look at things that are going on now and say, look back. And I think this is why the song hits me hard, because I can look back at those decisions and say, gosh, I would be in a different place if I didn't make that decision.
And from the bigger picture, the other reason we're talking about this, the other reason this kind of stuff has been kind of growing in the past few years, as we've talked about, the big reason Jordan Peterson exploded onto the scene you know, he came to prominence because of what was it, C-16, the Canadian bill
Yeah, yeah.
that would have, you know, made wrongthink illegal. That's where he came to prominence. But where he became huge as an author and an internet guy was for young men who felt listless, alone, misunderstood, or misunderstanding themselves. And this idea that the feminizing of our education system, of our culture, of our freaking sports, that has had a profound impact on boys and then into adulthood. And all of this time and energy is spent talking about let's just take, we have to have women in STEM, and let's ignore the fact that the graduation rates for boys have been plummeting with all this focus on, oh, we have to get women in STEM, even if they don't want to be in STEM. We have to have them in STEM. And let's ignore the fact of what is happening to boys and young men.
There's a good read right there over my left shoulder. Boys and Men, Brookings Institute, Richard Reeves. Let's go on since you're on a time constraint.
That verse is perfect for what we were just talking about.
And they don't care about what you know, how you feel, but what you provide inside that home. Don't give up, keep fighting. As a man, our sun is our horizon, and our father's actions play a role, and we end up like them. So they can't let us see them hurt, because we'll embody what they do.
So, yes. And now what happens when you don't have a father?
There's a reason that the number one predictor of criminality, low education, failure to graduate, depression, suicide, a whole host of negative outcomes for boys and young men is the lack of a father growing up. There's a reason for that.
It was almost better for me to have the negative role model than it was to have just the lack.
Mm-hmm. And that's in the literature. Again, Peterson has talked about this ad nauseum, that accepting abuse, that's a separate issue. Accepting abuse, even a bad father is better than no father. And the literature bears that out.
Still not recommended.
Still not recommended, no.
Well, you know, we talk about, you know, why do men stick around even when, you know, things aren't going well or whatever. There's this inherent thing, and I know I feel it when things are tough, is the number one indicator of child abuse is stepfather. 100-fold over any other thing. And as long as I am in that role and in that space, there is no chance for stepfather. And so, you know, we want to tell fairy tale forever after stories, but realistically, your kids are first. Your kids are, like he said, your horizon.
Yeah, and he's about to get real topical here, but I'm gonna have to pause there because there's my alarm to get up and go do my fatherly things.
Oh, or do we need to pause?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. All right, we're back. Sorry for the hiccup there. It was just getting deep.
Had to do manly things.
Yeah.
Which gave me time to think, so I have thoughts now, but let's continue.
Start a generational curse. No wonder most men are so depressed. All the things that they can't express. They go to war, get thrown on the shelf, then go back to war with their mental health. Then grab that bottle and...
As a military brat, I figured you'd have thoughts on that part. The cynic in me wants to say, yeah, you know, everything equal, well, except that whole front line thing. And
You know, this actually ties into some of the thoughts I had, and I'm trying to decide how to unpack this, but um, I think now, so one of the criticisms or one of the that you'll get about how PTSD wasn't a thing after World War II. I mean, it was, and it was acknowledged. Crap, I'm drawing a blank on the movie. There's a really good movie that was made right after the war, and it was about men coming home, and it included actual veterans. Well, which duh, because even the filmmakers like Jimmy Stewart was not only a veteran, but he stayed in the Air Force Reserve, and he made 2 or 3 star general even. But you know, it it did talk about it and the difficulty with it and having to adjust. But oh, we didn't talk about it. Yeah, there may have been something to that, but I also feel like you didn't necessarily need to talk about it, because what happened when those men came home? They got married and they started families. They had a support system because they had a wife to be that other half. They had children, which, as you said here and as you said before, that becomes your priority. Instinctively, that becomes your priority.
it becomes purpose.
It becomes purpose.
Mhm.
I think I've mentioned this before, but Chuck talked to me about it, that he had his own theory, which was that the act that the act of just out processing out of the military after World War II, simply because of the technology, meant you were in a camp, and then you were on a boat, and then you were in another camp, and then you were on a train, and then you might have gone to another camp before you were on a bus. It could take 6 months from the end of the war before you actually got back home. And that entire time, you're around other vets. He said the most jarring thing to him in all of his experience wasn't anything that actually happened in one of his 2 tours in Iraq. It was when he had a furlough. I can't remember how long it was, but he said, I literally went from being on a patrol where we took fire to the next day I was walking around in a mall with my sister. It was jarring. It was, I mean, that's going to affect your mental health. It was very jarring. And because you're completely outside of the scope of where you were a second ago, you don't have that support system. You don't have those fellow men who know exactly what you're going through because they've been through it themselves. So and I've experienced this personally with my dad's oldest brother. Did 2 tours in Nam. The first one was cut short because he was wounded, or the second one was cut short because he was wounded. And when I would go down there frequently while we were at OSU, because it was a lot closer than driving all the way back to San Antonio, and I told my dad about some of the things me and Uncle John would talk about, and he said, "You know more than I do," because he didn't talk about it. So, I was relating these stories to him, and he said, "Never heard it." He didn't talk about it. And we were all very careful to talk how we talked about it around Mock because of, her concern for her eldest child in Vietnam. But he came home, he was married, he got a job and started working. He had purpose. So it wasn't just, oh, we don't talk about our feelings. It wasn't necessarily necessary if you had those things that men have needed and used since we started walking upright, which was that family unit to give us not just purpose, but then also support.
Well, and we've got the flip side to it, which if you don't know who I'm talking about, just from me saying it the way it is, then that's good, because anybody who knows us wouldn't know who I'm talking about. But he's come back from several deployments. I think he's the 3rd marriage or 4th marriage or whatever, because every time he comes back from a deployment, his wife was with someone else. So that's the flip side to it. Now I'm getting back in,
Yeah.
you know, the major depression that this poor man is
Yeah. So
probably in.
now that thing that was supposed to be your support system is actually a drain on your mental health.
Which actually makes me wonder if some cultures have it right. Like I've brought up before, it's the tribe in Ethiopia that you're as a young man, you go off raiding and doing all the things and hunting, and you're not even allowed to get married till you're 25, which means you actually retired from those things.
Mm.
So the order is right. I've just done all these things dangerous, got my testosterone out, helped my tribe, and now I've earned my place in marriage. And now I have another purpose because I've already earned that spot. Now it's not going out and being a good member of my tribe, but now I've got to raise my children.
Well, but see, what I think that is it's not the specific mechanism. It is simply that this tribe, this culture acknowledges masculinity. Okay, because take it outside.
You have to, or the other tribe destroys you.
Exactly. But take it outside of the realm of this specific verse, which is talking about the way we have shamefully treated our veterans, and you know, where we give the platitudes of thank you for your service, but then we don't really honor that by doing what's necessary to help them after the fact. But you know, going along with your example of the person who's on third marriage because every time they came back from a deployment, oh look, my new wife is cheating on me that I got because the last wife cheated on me, and I guess we'll start this cycle all over again. But you know, you could take the military context out of it and you still have similar stories ad nauseum of, you know, oh my husband doesn't love me, he ignores me because he spends all his time with work. That's what he's supposed to do. He's taking care of you. And instead of acknowledging that and praising it, and yes, of course, working to find the balance, it's vilified. You're a piece of crap. You're toxic. We are vilifying masculinity. That's the problem with toxic masculinity, is the way it's used. It's just masculinity. Masculinity is inherently toxic. And we never talk about how toxic that ideal is, how toxic femininity and feminism can be. It's always about toxic masculinity. So even outside of the context of the more extreme example of a veteran is just the, you know,
the go to work every day and
the go to work every day. The guy who's working a job he doesn't like, or that's very physically demanding, which are a lot of the jobs men take. You don't see women marching for equal representation on road construction crews
or in a coal mine
or in a coal mine. Yeah. So, you know, even that, it's you're subjecting yourself to this, but you know, in the past, you were able to do it. You went through it. You spent 40 years at this crappy and or backbreaking job because you had that purpose. And not only the purpose, but again, the support system. And you don't have that anymore. In fact, to your, you know, the example you brought up, that support system is actually a drain on your mental health. So it's compounding the drain on your mental health that you're already getting from having to go to war, having to work a crappy job, the physical strain on you because of your job, all of these things.
Which gets us to the next step, which another Dax song that's worth a listen is Dear Alcohol. Which is really, really, really deep. But
well, I mean, that's a heck of a place to pause it right there. Grab that bottle and ask for help. Try to pull themselves out of hell.
Yeah.
Because, and again, try to
pull themselves out of hell, then fall back down and then realize that they're gonna have to do it themselves. It's the circle of life. As a man, you provide. They don't know what you're worth till the day that you die, and that's when they start crying.
This next part is we've talked about this before with mate swapping, and this is a reality for men. Okay, so say you're a married man with children. If that child dies, both of you will be devastated till the day you die. If your spouse dies as the man, you will be devastated for a long, long, long time. Remember Who's the Boss? That show?
Mm.
What was the major hangup in that show? What was the whole premise of the show if you really paid attention outside of the comedy? He refused to date because he could not let go. And he wanted to be a perfect father to his daughter, and he had his brothers there to help. And that was the whole premise of the show. Women handle it differently.
Yeah.
Bell curves and exceptions to the rule, as we always say in our disclaimers. Women mourn, and then they move on and find the next one. And that's just the reality as a man. It's just the way it is.
Then move on to a man to confide in. That's why we feel we can't hide ourselves. We can.
Well, and to further that point, they also do it during the marriage. When the husband is constantly at work, they already start that process a lot of the time, which is why when our friend gets deployed, they already have somebody because they were already starting that process. It's actually kind of natural. It sucks in today's Western world because we are not limited by the fact that we will not come home from work every day as we were when we would go hunt a woolly mammoth. But
Well, and that's why in the past, it used to be that women kept themselves from doing that by supporting each other. So one of the more underrated war movies is We Are Soldiers with Mel Gibson, based on Colonel Hal Moore's book, and Moore and Galloway wrote it. And something very different in that movie that you don't get in like Saving Private Ryan is all the home front stuff. Them while they're engaged in this vicious battle in the Idrang Valley, and they cut back to the wives who are together, who are the men are all deployed. So then and this is how it still works to this day, or is supposed to work, which is Mrs. Moore, the commanding officer's wife, leads the wives. She gets them together and says, all right, this is, who needs what? This person needs help with that. That person needs help with that. Who knows where to go to get this taken care of? And so then they have that support structure that they're not getting from their husband, because the husband is busy doing masculine, manly things that need to be done. So their support structure becomes each other.
Which is a positive manifestation of what we talk about as a negative, typically, as reputation damage with females. Because this is the cultural fix, and you see these swings back and forth depending on the time frame and what the actual nature is around the culture. But in Western culture, that support group is also the group that would damage you in a reputation sense if you did the natural reaction from our ancestry, which is to have a coalition of males that will be there if your primary male dies. And there's a good way to get that, and it's called sex. The cougar trope is actually something that's been building for thousands of years, because creating a coalition of very young men that have not established themselves yet is a good defense mechanism if your male is dead. And so now we fast forward to, thousands of years later, this group of females that are always a threat with reputation damage actually keeps them faithful while their man has gone to war. So there's actually a positive manifestation of the reputation damage kind of mentality.
Yeah. I like the imagery as well of the video of showing a number of masculine things, or showing a number of men doing things that are masculine is maybe a better way to put it. Because, as talked about early on in the video, this is where Peterson became so popular and with young men, is because they not only need purpose, they need validation that no, what you're doing is the right thing. Keep on it, even if it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's one of the things I was thinking about as I was driving to pick up my daughter from school is the idea of masculinity properly understood and in its proper place. Because one of the things that the media and the left lost its mind about with Peterson early on was his statement of fact that the threat of force underlies pretty much any male interaction, because that's who we are. That's part of our aggressive nature. Okay. But what was lost there was the threat of force.
Well, he also has a statement, and let me try to quote it, that it's, what is it? It is not, a great man is not dangerous. A great man is dangerous and knows not when to not use it.
Exactly. That's exactly where
that's
I was
not a
going.
quote. That's probably a paraphrase, but
I've mentioned this before, but kind of putting two different ideas together is because Whitlock has been, when he first started his new show, Fearless, something he talked about quite a bit and is continuing to talk about is that Black American culture is a matriarchy. We not only do we grow, so many of us, well over half now, I don't remember the exact numbers. I want to say it's something absurd like 70%. Not only do we grow up without fathers, but then we celebrate and idolize our mothers and grandmothers. It is a matriarchy. And it is for that reason that young Black men are so often in prison, because you do not learn how to properly constrain and direct your aggression. It's why he loves football, or what football used to be, and why he thinks it's the greatest sport, especially for boys who need to learn how to be a young man, because you are channeling that aggression into something productive.
well, let me go back to my, they need to feel something, that so much emphasis on, looking into yourself and knowing your feelings and everything. Well, if you tell a young boy that at some point, if it's all about self-reflection, so piggybacking on the video here, that self-reflection only brings you to frustration, and only brings you to, well, I've done all this and nobody gets it. It only brings you to that dark place. Whereas when I make the statement, guys need to feel, it is the part of why we're social beings. Guys need to feel with other guys a sense of accomplishment. We went out and did the thing. The basketball team won the game. We played as a team, blah, blah, blah. But with their partner, they don't need to talk about how much they love each other. They need their partner to make them feel loved. And it's not saying I love you. It is the passion of a kiss. It is the warmth of a hug. It is all of those things that actually cause a feeling. We are reactionary beings as men. We're not introspective beings as men. I tried to be introspective, and that's part of being transcendent. That's the old Marcus Aurelius, the Stoicism. But part of that is the realization that the reason you need that from other people is to keep you from just feeling the frustration, just feeling, because nature's out there to kill you. That's the fact of the matter. Survival of the fittest is the basis of everything. Nature wants to kill you. If it's a nice sunny day, if you sit out in it long enough, the sun will kill you. If it's a nice cool rainy day, you will still freeze if you sit in the rain all day. So viruses, all these things we've been through in the last couple of years. If you are only thinking about what you feel inside without anything external coming in and helping you with that, you will only focus on the negative. And when you focus on the negative, you become a reaction. So the worst thing you could tell a little boy is, think about your feelings. How are you feeling today? Because it's like, I'm actually pissed. That kid stole that part of my lunch. The teacher, gave me a bad mark, and Becky, keeps flicking boogers on me. And that's what the kid's going to react to, versus actually making the man feel loved, which I don't know. I don't know what the change is, but we do need a different approach to all this stuff.
Crap, I can't remember what episode it was.
Well, look at alcohol. He talked about alcohol, right? What does it do? It basically just short circuits your dopamine system. So you cease to have motivation, but also cease to have feeling. So you just go into a state of numbness, and the things that motivate you are the things that make you feel accomplished. But if nobody acknowledges that accomplishment, it becomes a frustration. And so you go into this cycle of numbing the fact that nobody acknowledges it, but then also losing motivation. And now you get in the downward spiral of alcoholism.
Or you're going to, and that's just a coping mechanism, that they brought up in the song, but it also touched on other things about feeling alone.
If you want to go all
depressed.
the way, we can go into male suicide rates.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, again, back to we need women in STEM, and let's ignore, how graduation rates and college enrollment rates are plummeting for males. Let's just ignore that while we spend so much energy focusing on women in STEM. And yeah, another aspect of that is mental health, and we want to especially affirm girls and tell them they can do anything. And meanwhile, let's just ignore the fact that male suicide rate has always been way higher than female suicide rate, and in the last few years it has jumped way up. And that is not an accident of the feminizing. The feminizing of our culture has been going on for decades, but what's the best way to phrase this? The anti-masculinity part of it has grown by leaps and bounds within the past few years. And so it's not an accident that that drug use, unemployment, and suicide are way up among young men.
Realistically, what is rampant drug use or alcoholism but slow suicide?
And which is a coping mechanism, which then leads to the ultimate coping mechanism of ending it all.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just, suicide is just taking the pain away. It's just the final form of it. And so we look at all of these other methods. They're all methods of just taking the pain away.
Mm-hmm. And I have to again go back to harping on the feminine side of this equation, because I've said before, men create civilization, but women civilize men.
This is where I'll have to disagree, and I'm going to go back to primatology. This is where I disagree with one of the greatest primatologists of all time, Richard Wrangham. He has written many a book and studied for longer than anybody about how males have domesticated other males. And then he comes to the final solution of we need to feminize men. There's a huge difference between domesticating and feminizing.
Yeah.
And the part he keeps missing in this new direction he's gone in feminizing men isn't the fact that we need to be a little less violent sometimes. It's the fact that, as you stated earlier, the threat of violence is what domesticated us in the first place. And so let's parallel that to the dating situation, right? So women have become highly selective of their mates because they have complete freedom right now. They don't need a man for their income. They got birth control. They've got all of these things. They've become highly selective. And so they basically narrowed it down to the top 5%, which is now the basically 3 to 5% of sociopaths out there, because how can you not be a little narcissistic if you grew up the good looking guy on campus the whole time?
Yeah.
Right. And you're basically fed fed this validation from birth because you're this high status male, whether it's your parents' money, whether it's your good looks, whether it's a combination of all of those, whether you're tall, whether you're good at sports, every bit of that. So these guys are the guys that are considered alpha right now. They're the cream of the crop, and they're the only ones getting any attention. That's what happens when we leave the female side in charge of the selection process. We need the beta males coalitional aspect to come in and say, we can do this. And it's the threat of violence that comes. So yeah, you could be Giga Chad, but Quasimodo can still beat you in a fight. Right?
Well, let me define what I mean by civilizing men. So men literally build civilization. We are object oriented. So we take the risks, we do the things, we build the things. We have created.
You mean you don't agree with Nikki Haley's famous saying?
Oh,
if you want something said, call a man. If you want something done, call a woman.
It's
exactly the opposite of what
I had not heard that, but that's one more.
That's from the first debate.
That's one more reason she is such a disappointment. But anyway, but where women civilize men is they direct that aggression. They direct that threat of violence into something productive. It is no longer the threat of violence to get what I want. It is the threat of violence to protect my mate, my offspring, neighborhood, city, culture. That is where that is directed. And you don't have that with, to your point, or adding on to your point, men are now disposable. They are now disposable things to women. So you're not going to civilize a man if you don't invest in him. You don't invest in something that's disposable. You take care of the good plates. You throw away the paper plates.
Yeah. This is actually no one. That's why I appreciate artists like Dax and podcasts like Modern Wisdom, authors like Richard Reeves, Warren Farrell, Boy Crisis, right up there. Because realistically, everybody makes a big deal about the pick you up by your bootstraps. The saying about minorities, that's exactly what you say to men all the time since antiquity. I mean, why shouldn't I say that to somebody else? Because that's what you're saying to me. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps. It's impossible. You pull on both of them, you leave the ground, gravity pulls you back down.
I don't remember what else I had to say, but we've kind of rambled a while on this already. So I think we've made the point.
Hopefully you stuck around. If you got here, then we were successful. I'm going to do all the copyright things in the comments and everything, or not the comments, the description. We'll see if this works. If not, then you didn't see this anyways.
All right. We'll see y'all Friday.
All right. Later.